The dreams always began with the color gold. Izuku Midoriya was 4 years old when the night terrors started. They weren't the normal nightmares of a toddler, no monsters hiding in the closet, no villains lurking in the shadows of the playground. His dreams were catastrophic. They were painted in the blinding, searing hues of dying stars and shattered planets. He would stand on a landscape of teal grass and blue water, watching the sky bleed green as a planet tore itself apart from the inside out. He would look down at his hands, finding them larger, calloused, and wrapped in blue wristbands. He would feel an ocean of heat roaring beneath his skin, an absolute, unadulterated fury that felt entirely foreign to a sweet, soft-spoken boy from Mizurufu, Japan. In these dreams, a voice would scream out, raw and echoing with agony. Sometimes it was a name, Krillin. Other times it was a sound, a battle cry that shook the very foundations of the earth. But the most distinct memory was the sensation of his hair spiking upward, flashing from black to a brilliant, luminescent gold, accompanied by a surge of power so immense it felt like he was holding the universe in his palms. Then, he would wake up. He would wake up in his all-might pajamas, gasping for air, the phantom heat in his chest fading into a dull, rhythmic thrum. His mother Inko would rush in, holding him as he cried, assuming it was just a child's overactive imagination. But Izuku knew differently. The power felt real. It felt like it belonged to him. Then came the doctor's appointment. The X-rays. The extra joint in his pinky toe. You should probably give it up, the doctor had said, his voice carrying the bored indifference of a man delivering the weather report. Quirkless. The word had shattered Izuku's world. In a society where 80% of the population possessed some sort of superhuman ability, being quirkless was synonymous with being a relic. It meant you were fragile. It meant you were obsolete. But as Izuku sat in the dark living room that evening, watching the video of All Might's debut on repeat, the tears streaming down his face felt strangely hollow. His mother hugged him from behind, sobbing, apologizing over and over again. Izuku stared at the screen, watching All Might laugh amidst the wreckage. I can be a hero too, Izuku thought. Not because of a delusion, but because beneath the devastation of his diagnosis, the golden warmth in his chest had never left. The doctors had looked at his bones, at his DNA, but they hadn't looked at whatever was vibrating beneath his sternum. There was something inside of him, something vast, dormant, and waiting. He just didn't know how to wake it up. A few blocks away, Katsuki Bakugo was also having dreams, though his were infinitely more violent. Where Izuku dreamed of gold and sorrow, Katsuki dreamed of crimson and pride. He dreamed of standing atop mountains of corpses, clad in strange white armor. He dreamed of a blood-red sky, of raising a single, white-gloved hand and watching an entire city evaporate into a pillar of blinding light. He dreamed of a massive, monstrous ape with red eyes, roaring at a full moon. Above all, he dreamed of him. A low-class clown in an orange gi. A laughing idiot who always stood one step ahead of him. Kakarot. Katsuki would wake up from these dreams with his teeth grinding, his sheets soaked in sweat, his palms popping with involuntary sparks. When his quirk manifested, it was celebrated as a miracle. He secreted nitroglycerin-like sweat from his palms and could ignite it at will. It was flashy, powerful, and perfectly suited for a top-tier hero. The teachers praised him. His parents praised him. The other children followed him like ducklings behind an alpha predator. But Katsuki hated it. He hated it because it felt wrong. It felt laughably, humiliatingly small. When he raised his hands to create an explosion, his muscle memory expected something entirely different. He expected to cup his hands, to feel raw, crackling purple energy gathering in his palms. He expected to level mountains. He expected the earth to tremble beneath his boots. Instead, he got a few loud pops and a puff of smoke. This isn't my power, a dark, ancient voice in his mind would whisper. This is a parlor trick. I am a prince. I am the elite. Why am I trapped in this pathetic, fragile body? This cognitive dissonance bred a deep, irrational fury within him. He was the best in his class, but he felt like a shadow of a god. And no one frustrated him more than Izuku Midoriya, Deku. The quirkless loser. The pebble on the side of the road. By all logic, Katsuki shouldn't have given a damn about Izuku. But every time Katsuki looked at the green-haired boy, his blood boiled. It wasn't just because Izuku was weak. It was because when Katsuki looked into Izuku's eyes, he saw a haunting familiarity. He saw a quiet, unbreakable resilience that defied the boy's frail physique. The boiling point happened when they were 7. Katsuki had slipped off a log, tumbling into a shallow creek. It was a minor fall. He was fine. But when he looked up, Izuku was there, reaching a hand down to him. "Are you okay? You didn't hit your head, did you?" To anyone else, it was a gesture of simple childhood concern. But to Katsuki, a blinding flash of memory overlaid the scene. He wasn't in a creek in Japan. He was battered, broken, bleeding out on a desolate battlefield, and a warrior in torn orange clothing was looking down at him with that exact same expression of profound, infuriating pity. Katsuki smacked Izuku's hand away, a tiny explosion scorching the boy's fingertips. "I don't need your help, Deku!" Katsuki roared, his voice cracking with a rage that belonged to an adult, to a warrior stripped of his honor. "Don't you dare look down on me, Kakarot!" The thought echoed in Katsuki's mind, freezing him for a fraction of a second. Kakarot? Who the hell is Kakarot? He pushed the thought down, burying it under layers of adolescent anger and pride. From that day on, Katsuki made it his mission to break Izuku Midoriya. If he could break him, he could prove that the dreams were just dreams. He could prove that he was the strongest. 10 years passed. The world remained oblivious to the cosmic anomaly residing in Muzurifu. 14-year-old Izuku Midoriya sat at his desk at Aldera Junior High, frantically scribbling in his hero analysis for the future, number 13. He was analyzing Mount Lady's debut, mumbling under his breath about the efficiency of gigantification quirks versus the collateral damage they caused. "Since you're all third years, it's time for you to think seriously about your future," the teacher announced, tossing a stack of career aptitude papers into the air. "But who am I kidding? You're all planning to go into the hero course, right?" The classroom erupted in a chorus of cheers, students showing off their quirks. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks. But using them in school is against the rules." The teacher laughed. "Sensei, don't lump me in with these losers." Katsuki's arrogant drawl cut through the noise. He was leaning back in his chair, his feet resting on the desk. "I'm not gonna be stuck at the bottom with the rest of these rejects." The class erupted in outrage, but Katsuki just smirked, small explosions popping in his palms. "Bring it on, extras! I aced the mock test. I'm the only one here who's got the stuff for Yue High School. I'm gonna surpass All Might and become the top hero." "Oh, you're going for Yue Bakugo?" the teacher asked, looking at his clipboard. "Midoriya, you're also applying for Yue, right?" Silence fell over the room. Then, explosive laughter. "Midoriya? No way! You can't get in on just studying. He's quirkless." Izuku shrank in his seat, his face flushing. They got rid of that rule. I could be the first one to." Boom! A heavy explosion slammed onto Izuku's desk, throwing him backward onto the floor. Katsuki stood over him, smoke curling from his palms, his crimson eyes narrowed into slits of pure malice. "Listen up, Deku," Katsuki snarled. "You're worse than the rest of these rejects. You're completely quirkless. You really think you can rub shoulders with me?" Izuku scrambled back against the chalkboard. "No, Kaken, wait. I'm not trying to compete with you, I swear. It's been my dream since I was little. There's no harm in trying." "Try? Try what? To die in the entrance exam?" Katsuki mocked, though his heart was pounding with that familiar, inexplicable rage. He looked at Izuku's trembling form, yet he didn't see weakness. His primal instinct screamed that a sleeping dragon was sitting in front of him. It drove Katsuki insane. After class, Katsuki took Izuku's prized notebook, blew it up between his palms, and tossed it out the window into a koi pond. Most top-tier heroes have stories about them from their school days. "I want the shine of being the only one from this mediocre junior high to make it into Yue," Katsuki said, his voice deadly calm as he placed a smoking, hot hand on Izuku's shoulder. "So forget Yue, nerd. If you want a quirk so badly, take a swan dive off the roof and pray you get one in your next life." Izuku froze. The cruelty of the word stung, but as he looked at Katsuki's back walking out the door, the strange, dormant energy in Izuku's chest gave a sharp, sudden pulse. It wasn't anger. It was a bizarre, almost brotherly exasperation. "You're always so angry, Vegeta." Izuku blinked, shaking his head. "Vegeta? What? Where did that come from?" He walked outside to retrieve his notebook from the koi pond. The fish were nibbling on it. "That's not fish food, you guys," Izuku sighed, pulling the soggy, burnt book from the water. He walked home alone, taking the route under the bridge. He tried to force a smile, mimicking All Might's booming laugh to cheer himself up. Ha! 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 A strange, squelching noise echoed through the tunnel. Izuku stopped. From the manhole cover behind him, a massive, foul-smelling mass of dark green sludge began to ooze upward. Two large, manic eyes formed in the center of the liquid. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, the sludge villain gurgled, lunging forward. Before Izuku could react, the sludge engulfed him. It forced its way down his throat, into his nose, cutting off his airway. The sheer pressure was immense. Izuku clawed at the sludge, trying to tear it away, but his hands slipped through the liquid form. "Don't worry," the villain whispered in his ear. "It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. Then, it'll all be over. Thanks, kid. You're my hero." Izuku's vision began to blur. His lungs burned. Panic set in. He was going to die here. A quirkless loser who never even got to try. No. Deep within the microscopic architecture of his cells, something ancient recognized the threat of death and rejected it. The human body has limiters to prevent muscles from tearing themselves apart. Quirks are biological functions governed by genetics. But Ki, the life force of the universe, the energy of a warrior race long erased from the cosmos, operates on the soul. As Izuku's consciousness faded, his eyes suddenly snapped open. The scara, usually white, briefly flared with a blinding, ethereal teal light. Inside Izuku's mind, a silhouette of a golden ape roared. For a fraction of a microsecond, a razor-thin aura of white-silver energy erupted from Izuku's skin. It was soundless, but the sheer concussive force of the energy created a localized shockwave. The sludge villain shrieked in sudden agony as the silver energy burned it like battery acid. The villain was involuntarily blown back a few inches, tearing its mass out of Izuku's throat just enough for the boy to gasp for a desperate lungful of air. What the hell was that? The villain thought, terrified. His body just repelled me. It felt like grabbing a live power line. Before the villain could re-engage, the manhole cover blasted into the ceiling. "Have no fear, you are safe!" A booming voice echoed through the tunnel. A massive figure stood in the shadows, muscles bulging under a white t-shirt. "Now that I am here, All Might?" the villain screamed. Texas smash! The wind pressure from the punch completely obliterated the villain's form, splattering him across the tunnel walls. Izuku, already exhausted from the near-death experience, and the micro-burst of his dormant ki, felt his eyes roll to the back of his head as he collapsed into unconsciousness. Tashinori Yagi, All Might, quickly scooped the sludge into 2 empty soda bottles. He wiped the sweat from his brow, coughing up a small speck of blood. His time limit was running low. He turned to the unconscious boy on the ground. He stepped forward to gently slap the kid awake, but as he got within 3 feet of Izuku, All Might froze. As the wielder of One for All, Tashinori possessed a unique sixth sense regarding power. One for All was the accumulation of power passed down through generations. He could feel the embers of the past users inside him. But as he looked at this green-haired boy, the hairs on Tashinori's arms stood straight up. It was faint, almost imperceptible, like the heat radiating from a pavement hours after the sun had gone down. But it was there, an energy signature so dense, so terrifyingly vast, that for a split second, the number one hero felt a primal instinct to take a fighting stance. What is this boy? Tashinori thought, his blue eyes wide. This isn't a quirk. It feels like staring into a star. Hey, wake up. All Might gently tapped Izuku's cheek, pushing the bizarre sensation aside. Izuku's eyes snapped open. He scrambled back, staring in awe at the massive hero standing before him. The next few minutes were a blur for Izuku, getting an autograph, desperately clinging to All Might's leg as he jumped away, landing on the roof, and watching his idol deflate into a skeletal, coughing man. Izuku listened to All Might's tragic backstory, the horrific injury inflicted by toxic chainsaw. No, a villain he wouldn't name. Izuku listened, his heart breaking, but then he asked the question that had defined his entire life. Can someone without a quirk be like you? Izuku asked, squeezing his eyes shut. Can I be a hero, even if I'm quirkless? Tashinori looked at the boy. He remembered the terrifying, sun-like presence he had felt radiating from the kid just minutes prior. He thinks he's quirkless, Tashinori realized with a jolt of shock. The doctors must have misdiagnosed him. Whatever power he has, it's locked away. It's dormant, and it's so tightly coiled that machinery probably can't even detect it. But Tashinori couldn't tell the boy that. He didn't understand the power himself. And being a hero was too dangerous for someone who couldn't consciously control whatever was sleeping inside them. Pro-heroes are always risking their lives, Tashinori said softly, returning to his gaunt form. Some villains just can't be beaten without powers. So no, I honestly don't think you can become a hero without a quirk. The word shattered Izuku. If you want to help people, become a police officer. It's not a bad way to live, Tashinori said, walking toward the roof access door. It's not bad to dream, but you also have to consider what's realistic, young man. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof, the silence deafening. The golden warmth in his chest felt like it had turned to ice. A few blocks away in Tatooine's shopping district, chaos had erupted. The sludge villain, having escaped All Might's pockets during the mid-air grapple with Izuku, had reformed. And this time, it had found a hostage with a powerful quirk. Katsuki Bakugo thrashed wildly, his face half submerged in the suffocating sludge. He set off explosion after explosion, blowing out the windows of the surrounding shops, setting fires to the alleyways. Get off me! Get off me! Katsuki screamed internally, the slime burning his lungs. What power! The villain laughed crazily. I hit the jackpot. With this quirk, I can take out All Might. The pro-heroes, Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Mount Lady Backdraft, were gathered around the perimeter, hopelessly watching. Mount Lady couldn't fit in the two-lane street. Kamui Woods was weak to fire. Death Arms couldn't punch a liquid. We just have to wait for someone with a suitable quirk. Death Arms shouted over the roar of Katsuki's explosions. Through the haze of smoke and pain, Katsuki glared at the useless heroes. Pathetic, his mind hissed. You call yourselves warriors? You stand there and watch? Katsuki's pride, a pride forged over lifetimes of battle, conquest, and eventual redemption on distant worlds, flared hotter than his explosions. He would not die here. He was Katsuki Bakugo. He was the prince of all. Prince of what? The thought slipped through the cracks of his panic. Prince of who? He screamed, pushing every ounce of his energy into his palms. The explosions grew larger, turning from orange to a faint, crackling blue, but it wasn't enough to displace the villain's sheer mass. He was suffocating. His vision was going black. Then, he saw him. Standing in the crowd of onlookers, clutching a burned notebook, was Izuku Midoriya. Izuku had walked toward the explosions in a daze, his mind still reeling from All Might's rejection. When he looked at the center of the chaos, his heart stopped. He saw the sludge villain. And trapped inside it, he saw Katsuki. Katsuki's eyes met Izuku's. In that singular moment, Izuku didn't see the bully who had tormented him for 10 years. He didn't see the arrogant teenager who told him to jump off a roof. He saw a warrior. A proud, defiant prince who was fighting a losing battle, begging for a warrior's death rather than suffocation in the mud. He saw the face of a man who had sacrificed himself in a blinding flash of golden light to destroy a pink monster. The memory hit Izuku so hard he staggered forward. Majin. Vegeta. Izuku's body moved before his brain could process what was happening. He didn't think about being quirkless. He didn't think about All Might's words. He just knew his rival was dying, and he would not allow it. Stop, kid! You'll get yourself killed! Death Arms yelled as Izuku sprinted past the police barricade. Izuku sprinted toward the towering mass of sludge. The villain looked down, recognizing the green hair. You again? I'll crush you! Izuku didn't stop. He threw his backpack, his pencil case flying open. A single mechanical pencil struck the villain directly in the eye. The monster recoiled with a wet shriek, loosening its grip on Katsuki's mouth. Katsuki gasped for air. Deku? What the hell are you doing here? I don't know. Izuku cried out, tears streaming down his face. He clawed at the sludge, trying to dig Katsuki out. My legs just moved. You looked like you were asking for help. Katsuki's pupils shrank. The words struck him like a physical blow. It was the creek all over again. The pity. The infuriating, unconditional compassion, but this time, it was different. The villain raised a massive tendril of sludge, poised to smash Izuku into the pavement. Die, brat. In the crowd, Toshinori Yagi watched in horror. He was too weak. He had run out of time. He grasped his bleeding side, cursing his own uselessness. Pathetic. I reprimanded him for dreaming, and here he is, doing what none of us had the courage to do. As the sludge tendril whipped down toward Izuku's head, the universe seemed to hold its breath. Time slowed to a crawl. Izuku looked up at the descending mass of death. He felt the air pressure shifting. He felt the heat of the surrounding fires. I need power, Izuku thought. I need to save him. Deep within his core, the seal on his soul finally cracked. It wasn't a full break. It was a microscopic fissure. But for the reincarnated soul of Son Goku, a microscopic fissure was enough to shatter the laws of physics. Toshinori was the only one who saw it clearly. Izuku planted his feet. His stance shifted, unconsciously adopting a martial arts form that hadn't been seen on Earth in millennia. He pulled his right arm back to his hip. For a blinding fraction of a second, the flames surrounding the alleyway flickered and blew outward, extinguished by a sudden, intense vacuum of air. Izuku's messy green hair spiked violently upward, flashing a brilliant, ethereal teal. His muscles tensed, his veins glowing faintly beneath his skin. A quiet, echoing chant vibrated in Katsuki's mind, a sound he had heard in his dreams 1,000 times before. Ka-mi ha-mi. Izuku thrust his palms upward, parrying the falling tendril. He didn't fire an energy beam. He didn't shout the name of the attack. But the pure, raw kinetic force of his ki erupted from his hands in a concussive shockwave of white-silver light. Boom! The shockwave hit the sludge villain like a freight train. It didn't pierce the villain. It completely displaced the air, creating a localized hurricane. The villain's body was violently blown backward, tearing completely away from Katsuki. The sheer force of the invisible blast shattered the remaining glass in a 2-block radius, and sent the pro-heroes skidding backward. The villain screamed in agony, its liquid form destabilized and boiling from the intense heat of the ki friction. Katsuki fell to the ground, coughing violently, staring up at Izuku in sheer, unadulterated shock. Izuku stood frozen, his hair falling back down, his eyes returning to their normal emerald green. The silver aura vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving Izuku completely drained. His arms felt like they were made of lead. He had no idea what he had just done. He thought he had just punched the air really hard. Toshinori Yagi, however, had seen everything. The number one hero felt a surge of adrenaline that temporarily bypassed his limits. His body expanded, muscle mass exploding outward. That power! All Might thought, his heart pounding like a drum. It wasn't a quirk. It was something else. Something pure. Before the villain could recover from Izuku's invisible blast, All Might was there. He gripped Katsuki's collar, pulling him to safety. I really am pathetic, All Might announced, blood dripping from his chin as he smiled his trademark smile. I told you what it takes to be a hero, but I wasn't living up to my own ideals. Pros are always risking their lives. All Might pulled his arm back. Detroit smash. The punch created a tornado, shifting the air pressure so drastically that rain began to pour from the sky. The sludge villain was scattered to the winds. The crowd erupted in cheers. The aftermath was a blur. The pro-heroes scolded Izuku for his recklessness, praising Katsuki for his bravery and his tough quirk. Izuku sat on the pavement, exhausted, watching the heroes coddle Katsuki. He felt like a failure. He had moved without thinking, and he hadn't even defeated the villain. But Katsuki wasn't listening to the heroes. His crimson eyes were locked onto Izuku. When the heroes finally let them go, Izuku began his slow walk home. Hey! Deku! Izuku turned around. Katsuki was sprinting toward him, panting heavily. The blond boy stopped a few feet away, his fists clenched tight at his sides. Listen to me, you quirkless nobody! Katsuki shouted, his voice echoing in the empty street. I didn't ask for your help. And you didn't save me. Got it? I was fine by myself. You're nothing. You hear me? Stop looking down on me, cockroach. Katsuki froze. The word had slipped out before he could stop it. Izuku blinked, tilting his head. Kaka-rot? Kaken, what does that mean? Katsuki's face turned pale. He looked at his hands, trembling slightly, before turning around and marching away furiously. Shut up. Just shut up, Deku. Izuku watched him go, completely bewildered. But before he could process the strange interaction, a massive figure burst from the alleyway, skidding to a halt in front of him. I am here! All Might announced, posing triumphantly. All Might? Izuku shrieked, jumping back. What are you doing here? How did you get away from the reporters? Ha! Standing away from reporters is a piece of cake. Why? Because I am all M. He coughed violently, a spray of blood erupting from his mouth as he deflated back into his skeletal form. All Might. Toshinori wiped his mouth, looking at Izuku with a seriousness that made the boy stiffen. Young man. I came to thank you, and to correct my earlier mistake, Toshinori said, stepping forward. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't acted, that boy would have died. Izuku looked down. But I didn't do anything. I just got in the way. That is a lie, Toshinori said firmly. Izuku looked up in surprise. The pro-heroes scolded you because they didn't see what I saw, Toshinori explained, his blue eyes piercing through Izuku. They thought the villain simply lost its grip, but I was watching you, young Midoriya. When you thrust your hands forward, you unleashed an energy I have never felt before in my entire life. Izuku's breath hitched. What? But I'm quirkless. The doctors were wrong, Toshinori stated unequivocally. You are not quirkless. The power you hold inside you, it is vast. It is ancient. And it is entirely unrefined. It's like you have an ocean locked inside a glass bottle. The reason you can't access it is because the bottle, your physical body, isn't strong enough to open the lid without shattering. Izuku fell to his knees, tears welling in his eyes. He wasn't quirkless? The golden dreams, the warmth in his chest, it was real? Top heroes have stories about them from their school days, Toshinori said softly. Most of their stories have one thing in common. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. Izuku sobbed, clutching his chest. You can become a hero, Toshinori said, standing tall. Izuku cried, bowing his head to the pavement, overwhelmed by the validation he had sought for 10 long years. I deem you worthy of my power, Toshinori said. My quirk is yours to inherit. Izuku stopped crying, looking up in sheer confusion. Huh? Inherit? Toshinori explained one for all. The stockpiling of power, the transferring from one person to the next. He explained how he had been searching for a successor, someone with the true heart of a hero. Your own latent power is dormant, Toshinori explained. I believe one for all can be the key. By inheriting my quirk, it will bolster your physical vessel. It will give you the strength to break the seal on your own hidden power and merge it with mine. You want to give me your quirk? Izuku whispered. Yes. Will you accept it? Izuku didn't hesitate. He stood up, wiping his tears away, his eyes filled with a burning, unyielding determination. Yes. I'll do it. 10 months of hell followed. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park was a dumping ground for the city's trash. For 10 months, Toshinori pushed Izuku to the absolute brink of human endurance. Izuku hauled refrigerators, trucks, and massive piles of scrap metal across the sand. Toshinori watched the boy's progress with growing fascination. Izuku's muscle growth was unnatural. He adapted to physical stress at an astronomical rate. When he was pushed to exhaustion, instead of collapsing, a strange vitality would surge through him, making him stronger than he was the day before. Zankai, a distant memory in Izuku's soul whispered, though he didn't know the word. On the morning of the UA entrance exam, Toshinori arrived at the beach to find it completely spotless. The sun was rising over the ocean, casting a golden hue over the water. Standing atop a massive pile of compressed trash, roaring at the sky, was Izuku Midoriya. He was shirtless, his muscles carved from granite, sweat glistening on his skin. Toshinori smiled. You didn't just clear the area I told you to. You cleared the whole beach. You really are an overachiever. Izuku leaped from the trash pile, landing gracefully on the sand. All might. I did it. Indeed you did. Your vessel is ready, Toshinori said, plucking a single blonde strand of hair from his head. He held it out to Izuku. Now, it is time for the ceremony. Izuku stared at the hair. What's the ceremony? Eat this, Izuku gagged. What? You have to consume some of my DNA to inherit the power. Come on, we don't have time. Chew it up and swallow. Reluctantly, Izuku took the hair, popped it into his mouth, and swallowed it dry. He waited for a moment. I don't feel anything. It takes a few hours to process through your digestive system and enter your DNA, Toshinori laughed. You'll feel it during the exam. Now, hurry up and go shower. You're gonna be late. Izuku bowed and sprinted toward his house. But Toshinori was wrong. It didn't take a few hours for One for All to process. Because Izuku Midoriya's biology was fundamentally, structurally different from a normal human's. As Izuku ran down the street, the strand of DNA entered his stomach. The stockpiled energy of One for All, cultivated by 8 previous users, prepared to integrate itself into his human nervous system. But Izuku wasn't just human. He was a scion reincarnate. The moment One for All touched his cellular structure, the dormant key inside him reacted violently. It didn't merge with One for All. It didn't welcome it. It devoured it. Izuku stopped dead in his tracks on the sidewalk. His eyes rolled back into his head. Thump. His heart gave a massive, agonizing beat. One for All was like throwing a gallon of highly combustible rocket fuel onto the glowing embers of a dying sun. The sheer influx of external energy forcefully shattered the seal on Izuku's soul. A horrific, blinding pain ripped through Izuku's body. He fell to his knees, screaming in agony. In his mind, he saw the golden ape. He saw the exploding green planet. He saw the face of a terrifying, pale tyrant with purple horns. He saw the man in the orange GI, holding his hands up to the sky to gather the energy of the universe. And then, he heard the voice. Not a whisper this time. A roar. I am Son Goku. On the sidewalk in Mizurifu, Izuku Midoriya's head snapped up. His messy green hair violently shot upward, turning a brilliant, blinding gold. His emerald eyes shifted into an icy, piercing teal. A massive, roaring pillar of golden energy erupted from his body, shooting into the morning sky and violently blowing the leaves off the surrounding trees. The concrete beneath his sneakers spiderwebbed and shattered under the immense gravitational pressure of his aura. For 2 entire seconds, the golden aura roared, lighting up the neighborhood like a second sun. Then, just as quickly as it appeared, it vanished. Izuku's hair dropped, returning to green. His eyes faded back to normal. He collapsed face first onto the cracked concrete, gasping for air, steam rising from his skin. He lay there for a minute, the pain subsiding, replaced by a feeling of absolute, terrifying clarity. He flexed his fingers. He could feel the energy now. It wasn't dormant anymore. It was awake, flowing through his veins like a river of fire. He slowly pushed himself off the ground, looking at his hands. One for all. Izuku whispered, though his voice sounded slightly deeper, carrying an edge of absolute, unbreakable confidence that wasn't there before. He clenched his fist, a small spark of golden lightning crackling across his knuckles. No, Izuku said softly, looking up at the sky. That's not what this is. He didn't know how he knew, but the truth was etched into his soul. One for All was merely the spark. The roaring inferno it had ignited belonged entirely to him. He looked toward the direction of UA High School. It was time to take the exam. And for the first time in his life, Izuku Midoriya wasn't afraid. The metallic crunch of the zero-pointer collapsing in on itself still echoed in Izuku Midoriya's mind, playing on a continuous, awe-inspiring loop. A week had passed since the UA entrance exam, and Izuku was still trying to dissect what exactly had happened. When Achiko Uraraka was trapped under the rubble, Izuku had leaped into the air. He hadn't just used One for All. He had tapped into that vast, boiling ocean of energy he had unlocked on the sidewalk that morning. He had channeled it into his right arm and punched the colossal robot. The resulting shockwave had defied physics. It hadn't just broken the robot, it had atomized the upper chassis. But the most shocking part was his arm. According to All Might's warnings, using 100% of his power with an unprepared vessel should have shattered his bones into dust. But it hadn't. Instead, right before impact, a thin, nearly invisible layer of silver energy had coated Izuku's skin, acting as a molecular shock absorber. His muscles had torn, and he was exhausted to the point of passing out, but his bones were entirely intact. Recovery Girl had merely kissed his forehead and told him he had severe muscle strain. It's not just a quirk, Izuku thought, staring at his right hand as he walked through the massive gates of UA High School. One for all is just a door. That energy, it's something else. It feels like it's been with me forever. It feels like breathing. He found Class 1A. Taking a deep breath, he opened the giant door, immediately wincing at the shouting echoing across the room. Take your feet off that desk. Tenya Ida, a tall, bespectacled boy with engine calves, was aggressively chopping the air. It's disrespectful to the upperclassmen and the craftsmen who made it. Ha! What did you say, Four Eyes? Katsuki Bakugo sneered, leaning back in his chair. What junior high did you go to? I'll blow you to bits. Izuku froze in the doorway. Katsuki's presence was like a physical weight in the room. Ever since the sludge villain incident, Katsuki had been different. He was always aggressive, but now there was a restless, feral edge to him. He looked like a caged predator pacing its enclosure. Katsuki's crimson eyes snapped to the door, locking onto Izuku. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Katsuki didn't yell. He didn't mock him. He just stared, his pupils contracting as a phantom memory of a man in an orange GI overlaid Izuku's UE uniform. Katsuki's jaw tightened, a low growl rumbling in his throat. Why? Katsuki's internal monologue raged. Why does this quirkless loser suddenly feel like a mountain? If you're just here to make friends, you can pack up your stuff and leave. A gruff, exhausted voice cut through the tension. A man in a yellow sleeping bag rolled onto the floor, unzipping it to reveal a scruffy, black-haired hero. Shota Aizawa. Eraserhead. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is limited. You kids aren't rational enough. Aizawa stood up, pulling a blue and white gym uniform from his sleeping bag. I'm your homeroom teacher. Put these on and head out to the training field. The quirk apprehension test was designed to weed out the weak. A quirk assessment? The class echoed in unison on the dirt field. What about the entrance ceremony? The orientation? Achiko asked. If you're going to become a hero, you don't have time for such leisurely events, Aizawa replied dryly. UA's selling point is how unrestricted its school traditions are. That's also how the teachers run their classes. Bakugo, you finished first in the practical exam, right? What was your best result for the softball throw in junior high? 67 meters, Katsuki answered, stepping forward. Try doing it with your quirk. Katsuki stepped into the throwing circle. He stretched his shoulders. He could feel everyone watching, but the only gaze that made his skin crawl was Izuku's. He needed to make a statement. He needed to prove that whatever weird trick Deku pulled on the zero-pointer was a fluke. Katsuki wound his arm back. He didn't just secrete nitroglycerin. He dug deep into that strange, vibrating fury that lived in his chest, the fury that belonged to a prince. He channeled it into his palms. Dai! A massive explosion erupted from his hand, but it wasn't the usual orange-red flame. At the core of the blast, a flash of pure, crackling blue energy propelled the ball into the stratosphere. The shockwave blew the hair back from the students' faces. Aizawa's digital device beeped. He held it up. 705.2 meters. Know your own maximum first, Aizawa said. That is the most rational way to form the foundation of a hero. The class erupted in excitement. But Aizawa wasn't finished. You have 3 years to become heroes. Will you have an attitude like that the whole time? Whoever comes in last place in all 8 tests will be judged to have no potential, and will be punished with expulsion. The air turned heavy. The tests began. Izuku performed moderately well in the 50-meter dash and grip strength, relying strictly on his newly forged physique. He was terrified of using the energy again. The sheer destructive output was too hard to control. If he unleashed it here, he might blow up the entire field. Finally, it was the ball throw. Izuku stood in the circle, holding the soft ball. I have to use it, he thought. If I don't, I'll be expelled. I just need a fraction of it. Just a drop. He closed his eyes. He reached into the core of his being, finding the roaring sun of energy. He envisioned pulling just a single thread of it, wrapping it around his right arm. He opened his eyes, pulling his arm back. He stepped into the throw, his arm whipping forward. But suddenly, the energy vanished. It felt as if a cold bucket of water had been dumped over his soul. The thread snapped. The ball flopped out of his hand, rolling a meager 46 meters. Izuku blinked in confusion. Huh! I felt the power, but... I erased your quirk, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing red, his capture scarf floating ominously around him. That ridiculous entrance exam. Completely irrational. What did you plan to do, shatter your arm again and need saving? You have zero control over your power. You cannot become a hero. Izuku stared at his teacher. Aizawa had used his erasure. He had temporarily suppressed One for All, the genetic stockpile of quirks. But as Izuku stood there, he realized something. The One for All spark was gone, yes. But the sun was still there. The ocean of heat within him hadn't been erased. Aizawa's quirk operated on genetics, disabling the quirk factor in DNA. But Ki was the energy of the soul. It couldn't be erased by a genetic mutation. I've returned your quirk, Aizawa sighed, his eyes returning to normal. You have 2 tries left. Get it over with. Izuku gripped the ball. He didn't need One for All for this. He needed the other thing. The ancient thing. He closed his eyes. He remembered the red sky from his dreams. He remembered the feeling of pushing his body past its absolute limits, multiplying his energy through sheer willpower and a synchronized heartbeat. Kaioken. He didn't know where the word came from, but his soul recognized the technique. Izuku's heart gave a violent, singular, thunderous pump, ba-thump. For a microsecond, a blazing, crimson aura erupted from Izuku's skin. The air pressure around him spiked so violently that the dust on the field was blown in a perfect circle away from him. Aizawa staggered back, his eyes widening in shock. Izuku whipped his arm forward. Smash! He didn't break his finger. He didn't shatter his arm. The crimson energy coated his limb, amplifying his kinetic output by a factor of 2. The ball ripped through the sound barrier with a deafening crack, leaving a trail of displaced air in its wake. It shot into the sky like a bullet. Aizawa stared at his device as it beeped. 705.3 meters. Izuku turned to Aizawa, his arm perfectly intact, though a faint wisp of steam was rising from his skin. Sensei. I can still move. Silence hung over the field. Aizawa was paralyzed. What was that? I erased his quirk. I felt it deactivate. But that red energy, that wasn't a quirk. That was raw, terrifying pressure. Deku. A low, vibrating growl broke the silence. Katsuki Bakugo was shaking. His eyes were wide, dilated with absolute, unadulterated rage. He hadn't just seen a good throw. He had seen the red aura. That crimson light had haunted his nightmares. It was the light of the low-class warrior who had humiliated him. The light of the clown who had shattered a prince's pride on a rocky wasteland. Hey! Katsuki's palms began to spark, not with orange fire, but with dense, crackling bioelectricity. What the hell was that? Cockroach? Katsuki lunged. The ground exploded beneath his feet as he rocketed toward Izuku with lethal intent, his right hand drawn back to deliver a killing blow. Izuku didn't flinch. His body shifted automatically into a defensive stance, his feet sliding apart, his hands rising to parry the inevitable strike. The green-haired boy's eyes sharpened, shedding his timid persona in a fraction of a second, replaced by the battle-hardened gaze of a martial arts master. Before they could collide, Aizawa's capture weapon shot out, wrapping tightly around Katsuki's waist and pulling him back. What is this cloth? It's stiff. Katsuki struggled, his explosions sputtering out as Aizawa erased his quirk. It's a carbon fiber woven with a special alloy, Aizawa growled, his eyes glowing red, though a drop of sweat rolled down his temple. These two, the killing intent between them isn't normal. It feels like they've been trying to murder each other for centuries. Stop using your quirks. I have dry eye. Aizawa let Katsuki go. Katsuki glared at Izuku, his chest heaving, his teeth bared. Izuku stared back, unblinking, the timid boy completely gone, replaced by a quiet, immovable wall of defiance. For the rest of the day, no one spoke to them. The class had realized quickly that the dynamic between Midoriya and Bakugo wasn't a standard childhood rivalry. It was a powder keg, and the fuse was lit. The tension didn't dissipate, it festered. During All Might's battle trial a few days later, the rivalry erupted into violence. Katsuki had abandoned all logic, hunting Izuku through the mock city. When they finally clashed, it wasn't a hero training exercise. It was a brawl. Katsuki had fired his gauntlet, a massive blast of heat that destroyed half the building. But Izuku had survived, parrying Katsuki's ferocious close-quarters combat with flawless, ancient martial arts. Katsuki's strikes were perfectly executed, brutal, and aimed at vital organs. Izuku dodged and countered with fluid, instinctual grace. All Might had watched the monitors in horror. Their forms. They fight like they've been at war for decades. This isn't high school brawling. Izuku had ultimately won the trial by firing an immense, upward blast of wind pressure, using One for All, to destroy the ceiling, allowing Uraraka to secure the weapon. But the physical victory felt hollow. Katsuki had been left trembling, his pride fractured once again, realizing that Izuku was holding back, that Izuku's true, golden power was still locked away. I'll surpass you, Deku! Katsuki had screamed, tears of rage in his eyes. I'll never lose to you again. Izuku had simply nodded, his heart aching with that familiar, cosmic sorrow. Now, a week later, Class 1A was on a bus heading to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, USJ, for rescue training. The atmosphere on the bus was relaxed, a stark contrast to the boiling tension between the two reincarnated warriors. Izuku sat quietly, staring out the window, trying to process his memories. They were coming back in flashes. A bald monk with dots on his forehead. A green man with a white cape. A beautiful woman with blue hair who screamed at him a lot. Midoriya, Tsuyu Ajui, a frog-like girl, said suddenly, poking her finger to her chin. I always say whatever's on my mind. Your quirk, it's a lot like All Might's. Izuku panicked slightly, waving his hands. Why you think so? Haha, well I mean, wait, Tsu, Eijiro Kurishima leaned over. All Might doesn't hurt himself when he uses his quirk. Midoriya's is similar, but different. Still, it's a flashy power. My hardening is useful, but it's not very flashy. I think it's awesome. Izuku beamed, the innocent schoolboy returning. If we're talking flashy and strong, it's gotta be Todoroki and Bakugo, Mina Ashido chimed in. Tsuyu riveted. Bakugo's always angry, so he won't be popular. Katsuki, sitting a few rows up, violently grabbed the railing of his seat. What did you say, Frogface? I'll be immensely popular. I am the elite. You extras should learn your place. See? Tsuyu pointed. We've only known you a few days, and it's already universally recognized that your personality is flaming garbage mixed with sewage. Denki Kaminari laughed. I'll kill you! Katsuki roared, sparks flying from his hands. But internally, he was seething for a different reason. Extras. They're all weak. The only one here who even registers on my radar is him. He shot a venomous glare at Izuku. I am a prince. Why do I have to suffer these fools? Quiet down, Aizawa ordered from the front. We're here. The bus pulled up to a massive, dome-shaped building. Standing out front in a spacesuit-like hero costume was the rescue hero, 13. They entered the USJ, all washing over the class as they took in the various zones, a shipwreck, a landslide, a mountain, a flaming city. 13 gave a speech about the danger of quirks. Powers are meant to save, not to kill. In this class, you will learn how to use your quirks for the sake of human life. Izuku felt a warmth in his chest. To save lives. Yes. That's what a hero does. But suddenly, the temperature in the dome plummeted. It wasn't a physical cold. It was a suffocating, oppressive wave of malice that washed over the class. Izuku's breath hitched. Katsuki stiffened, his crimson eyes snapping toward the central plaza. Both of their bodies reacted instantly. Their muscles tightened, their ki flaring deep within their cores in response to a visceral, biological threat. In the center of the plaza, the fountain sputtered. A swirl of purple, shadowy mist began to manifest, expanding rapidly into a massive warp gate. "Gather together and don't move," Aizawa shouted, his voice dropping an octave as he pulled his yellow goggles over his eyes. 13. Protect the students. A hand reached out of the purple mist. It was pale, grasping the edge of the portal. Then, a man stepped through. He was covered in disembodied hands, his scraggly light blue hair falling over his face. Behind him, dozens of villains began to pour out of the portal, wielding various weapons and quirks. "Is this like the entrance exam?" Kirishima asked, squinting. "Has the training already started?" "Don't move!" Aizawa roared, his capture scarf unfurling. "Those are villains!" The word hit the class like a physical blow. Fear paralyzed them, but Izuku and Katsuki weren't paralyzed by fear. They were hyper-focused on the portal. Because stepping out from behind the hand-covered man was a creature that defied the laws of nature. It was massive, muscular, and had exposed brain matter protruding from its skull. Its skin was pitch black, and its eyes bulged obscenely. It possessed the beak of a bird and the torso of a titan, but it wasn't the creature's appearance that disgusted the two scions. "It has no spirit," Izuku realized, his emerald eyes narrowing in horror. "There's no ki. No life force. It feels like a walking corpse fueled by artificial power. A biological weapon," Katsuki thought, his lip curling in sheer disgust. "An abomination. Like those damn androids." Eraserhead in 13, the hand-covered villain, Tamura Shigaraki, muttered, scratching his neck violently. "According to the schedule we acquired, All Might was supposed to be here. Where is he? I went through all the trouble of bringing this crowd, and the symbol of peace isn't here." Shigaraki looked up, his red eyes gleaming through the fingers of the hand on his face. "I wonder if he'll show up if we kill a few kids?" Aizawa didn't wait. He leaped down the massive staircase, plunging headfirst into the sea of villains. He moved with terrifying efficiency, erasing quirks and snapping bones with his capture scarf. "We need to evacuate," 13 ordered, ushering the students toward the exit. But Kurogiri, the warp gate villain, materialized in front of them, blocking the massive steel doors. "I am afraid I cannot allow that. We are the League of Villains. We have come to extinguish the symbol of peace." Katsuki didn't hesitate. "Move, extras!" he roared, launching himself into the air alongside Kirishima. "Die!" Katsuki yelled, firing a massive explosion at Kurogiri's metallic neck brace. The smoke cleared, but Kurogiri was unscathed. "That was close. You students are truly golden eggs. My job is to scatter you and torture you to death." The purple mist expanded, swirling violently and enveloping the class. Izuku felt the ground vanish beneath his feet. He was falling through a cold, lightless void. Splash! He crashed violently into water. He opened his eyes, salt water stinging them. He was in the shipwreck zone. As he kicked toward the surface, a villain with a shark-like mutation surged toward him, jaws wide open. Izuku didn't panic. His body simply reacted. He didn't use one for all. He twisted his body underwater, channeling a fraction of his ki into his leg. He delivered a flawless, devastating roundhouse kick directly to the villain's gills. The sheer concussive force of the underwater strike created a massive cavitation bubble. The villain was instantly knocked unconscious, spinning away into the depths. Izuku broke the surface, gasping for air, and leaped onto the deck of the sinking ship, finding Tsuyu and Mineta already there. Across the dome, in the ruin zone, Katsuki Bakugo landed gracefully on a crumbling building. 4 villains surrounded him, brandishing weapons. "Look what we got here!" "A kid! Don't let your guard down," another villain smirked. "He's probably crying his eyes out." Katsuki stood up slowly. He dusted off his gauntlets, a dark, terrifying smile spreading across his face. "Crying?" Katsuki whispered. He vanished. The villains didn't even see him move. Katsuki reappeared behind the largest villain, his fist already buried deep into the man's kidneys. The villain's eyes rolled back as he collapsed, completely paralyzed by the pressure point strike. What? The others yelled, lunging forward. Katsuki didn't use a single explosion. He ducked under a sword swing, grabbed the villain's wrist, and shattered it with a casual flick of his arm. He spun, driving his knee into the third villain's solar plexus, collapsing his diaphragm. The final villain backed away in terror. Why, you're just a kid! What are you? Katsuki raised his right hand, pointing his palm at the villain. He didn't activate his quirk. Instead, a small, blindingly bright sphere of golden energy formed in the center of his palm. I am Katsuki Bakugo, he sneered, his eyes flashing teal. And you're standing in my way. He flicked his wrist. The sphere of ki shot forward like a bullet, striking the ground in front of the villain and exploding with the concussive force of a mortar shell, sending the man flying into a concrete wall. Weak, Katsuki scoffed. He looked toward the central plaza. He could hear the sounds of battle. The eraser guy is fighting all of them alone, Katsuki thought. But he's getting tired. And that monstrosity with the exposed brain hasn't moved yet. Katsuki's blood pumped fiercely. A real battle. He blasted off into the air, riding his explosions toward the plaza. Back at the shipwreck, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta formulated a plan. Using Mineta's sticky balls, Tsuyu's jumping, and Izuku's raw power, they created a massive whirlpool that trapped the aquatic villains together. As they escaped to the edge of the central plaza, they hid behind a rock outcropping, looking out over the battlefield. What Izuku saw made his blood run cold. Aizawa was on the ground. The massive, brain-exposed creature, the Nomu, had him pinned. It held Aizawa's arms, breaking them with a sickening crunch. Aizawa screamed, his eyes bloodshot, desperately trying to erase the creature's quirk. But it didn't matter. Eraserhead, Shigaraki mocked, watching the blood pool around the hero. You're cool. But you can't erase pure, raw physical strength. Nomu possesses shock absorption and super regeneration. He's been engineered to kill All Might at 100% of his power. Shigaraki noticed the kids hiding behind the rock. He vanished in a burst of speed, reappearing directly in front of Tsuyu. He reached his hand out toward her face. Izuku's heart stopped. He didn't think. He didn't breathe. In a fraction of a millisecond, Izuku broke his limiter. Smash! Izuku crossed the distance instantly, his fist glowing with one for all, aiming directly at Shigaraki's chest. The wind pressure from his movement was so intense it blew the water out of the nearby lake. But as his fist connected, there was a sickening thud. The Nomu had moved. It had intercepted Izuku's punch, taking the 100% blow directly to its stomach. Izuku's eyes widened. It absorbed it? My arm didn't break, but it absorbed the kinetic energy completely. Nice try, Shigaraki grinned beneath his mask. Nomu, crush him. The Nomu raised a massive fist to obliterate Izuku. Boom! The massive steel doors of the USJ exploded inward. The smoke cleared, revealing a towering silhouette. But he wasn't smiling. I had a bad feeling, so I tore myself away from an interview and came, All Might said, his voice devoid of its usual booming cheer. He ripped off his tie. I found Aizawa's glasses on the way down. I am so sorry. We're getting a continue, Shigaraki laughed. The boss is here. All Might moved faster than the human I could track. In an instant, he had scooped up Aizawa, Izuku, Tsuyu, and Mineta, dropping them safely away from the villains. Go to the entrance. Take Aizawa with you. All Might ordered, his muscles bulging. All Might, you can't! Izuku yelled, his warrior instincts screaming. That thing, it took my strongest punch and didn't even flinch. It absorbed shock. Do not worry, young Midoriya. All Might posed. Because I am here, All Might charged the Nomu. The clash was titanic. They traded blows that shook the entire dome. The shockwaves shattered the remaining glass in the facility. Every punch All Might threw was a tornado, a hurricane of kinetic force, but the Nomu just took it. It absorbed the blows, regenerating any minor tissue damage, and punched back with equal ferocity. All Might went for a suplex, grabbing the Nomu and slamming it into the concrete. But Kurogiri reacted, opening a warp gate perfectly beneath them. The Nomu sank into the portal, its upper half reappearing from a second portal above All Might's back. The Noma locked its massive hands into All Might's weak spot, his surgical scar, and began to squeeze, its claws digging deep into the hero's fragile internal organs. All Might groaned in agony, blood spilling from his mouth. He was trapped. Half of his body was in the portal, and the Noma's grip was unbreakable. "This is the end, symbol of peace," Shigaraki laughed. "Kurogyri, close the gate. Cut him in half." Izuku watched from the sidelines, his heart pounding. The symbol of peace was dying. The man who had given him a chance, the man who had told him he could be a hero, was bleeding out on the pavement. "Let him go!" Izuku screamed, his legs moving before his brain could process. He sprinted toward the portal. "Don't be foolish, kid!" Kurogyri materialized in front of Izuku, the purple mist expanding to swallow him. But before Kurogyri could envelop Izuku, a blinding explosion struck the warp gate's metallic neck brace. "Get out of my way!" Katsuki Bakugo roared, rocketing out of the sky. He slammed his hand into Kurogyri's solid core, pinning him to the ground. "I've got you, you misty bastard! Move a muscle, and I'll blow you to hell!" Todoroki also arrived, sending a wave of ice across the plaza, freezing the right side of the Noma's body, loosening its grip on All Might. All Might tore himself free, coughing violently as he stumbled back. The students had grouped up. Katsuki held Kurogyri. Todoroki stood ready. Izuku stood beside them. "Nomu," Shigaraki hissed. "Kill the explosive brat. We need our gateway." The Nomu, half-frozen, forcibly shattered its own frozen limbs to break free of the ice. Before anyone could react, its arm regenerated with sickening speed. It vanished. The Nomu moved so fast that not even All Might could react in time. It appeared directly in front of Katsuki Bakugo, raising its massive, muscular fist. Katsuki's eyes widened. He couldn't dodge. The monster was too fast. The sheer physical power radiating from the beast was overwhelming. "I'm going to die," Katsuki realized. But in that singular millisecond, Katsuki's soul rejected death. He was the prince. He would not be struck down by a mindless beast, and simultaneously Izuku's soul rejected the loss of his rival. Bam! All Might had thrown himself in front of Katsuki, taking the Noma's punch directly to his chest. The shockwave blew Katsuki and Izuku backward, scattering them across the plaza. All Might stood trembling, coughing up copious amounts of blood. His time limit was up. His muscular form was flickering, sputtering like a dying candle. "All Might," Izuku whispered in horror. "He's weak," Shigaraki laughed maniacally. "Look at him. He's bleeding. The symbol of peace is nothing but a wounded animal. Noma! Finish him. Tear him apart." The Noma roared, charging at the crippled hero. All Might raised his fists, preparing for a final, suicidal clash. But it never happened. The temperature in the USJ didn't just drop this time. The air ignited. A sound resonated through the dome, a sound like a jet engine, mixed with the roar of a hurricane. Shigaraki stopped laughing. The villains froze. Even the Noma halted its charge, its primitive brain detecting a threat level that overrode its programming. In the center of the plaza, dust and debris began to levitate. Small pebbles floated upward, defying gravity, spiraling into the air. Standing side by side, 10 feet apart, were Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo. They weren't looking at Shigaraki. They weren't looking at All Might. Their eyes were locked onto the Noma. "A mindless beast," Katsuki whispered, his voice echoing with an unnatural, dual-layered resonance. The teenage rasp was there, but beneath it was the deep, aristocratic baritone of an ancient warlord. "You dare to lay your hands on a warrior, a biological puppet," Izuku finished, his voice matching the dual resonance, carrying the calm, terrifying cadence of a martial arts god. "You have no ki. No spirit. You are nothing but an empty shell." All Might stared in absolute shock. The presence he had felt on the beach, the sun-like energy, it was back. But it wasn't just Izuku. Bakugo possessed it too, and their energies were resonating. Izuku's stance shifted. He dropped his left foot back, sinking his center of gravity. He brought his hands together, cupping them at his right hip. A blinding, ethereal white-blue light ignited between his palms. Katsuki's stance mirrored the shift, but opposite. He planted his feet wide, pulling both of his hands back to his left shoulder, the palms facing forward. A violent, crackling purple aura erupted around his body. The sheer pressure of their combined ki created a dome of wind that pushed Todoroki, Kirishima, and even All Might backward. The concrete beneath their feet didn't just crack, it vaporized into dust. What is that? Shigaraki screamed, instinctively taking a step back. Noma! Kill them! Kill them now! The Noma roared, charging at the two boys with blinding speed. Time seemed to slow. Izuku's eyes flared teal. The energy in his hands grew blindingly bright, illuminating the entire USJ like a miniature sun. Ka! Izuku chanted softly, the sound vibrating through the air. Me! The blue light expanded. Katsuki's eyes narrowed, bleeding into a terrifying, luminous blue-green. The purple energy in his palms crackled with violent bioelectricity, compressing into a sphere of absolute, unadulterated destruction. Gallic! Katsuki growled, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. The Noma was 10 feet away. 5 feet. Ha! Izuku's voice rose. Me! The Noma raised its massive fists, ready to crush them both. Gone! Katsuki roared, throwing his hands forward. Ha! Izuku screamed, thrusting his cupped hands out. 2 beams of unimaginable power erupted from the boys. From Katsuki, a searing, violent pillar of purple energy shot forward. From Izuku, a massive, roaring torrent of blinding white-blue light tore through the air. The 2 beams didn't repel each other. Like 2 halves of a fractured soul, the blue and purple energies wrapped around one another in a perfect, spiraling helix. The energies synchronized, multiplying their destructive force exponentially. The blast hit the Noma point blank. There was no sound. The kinetic force was so absolute that it temporarily ruptured the eardrums of everyone in the facility. The Noma's shock absorption quirk attempted to process the attack. But ki is not kinetic shock. It is raw, burning life force. It is the molecular disintegration of matter. The Noma didn't get pushed back. It didn't absorb the blow. The moment the spiraling beam of blue and purple energy made contact, the Noma's upper half simply ceased to exist. The energy vaporized its arms, its torso, its exposed brain, and its beak in a millisecond. The beam didn't stop there. It tore through the empty space where the Noma had been, ripping through the concrete floor, tearing a massive, smoking trench through the plaza. It blasted into the reinforced steel wall of the USJ, melting the metal instantly, and shot out into the sky, parting the clouds above UA High School in a perfect, circular clearing. Silence descended upon the USJ. The only sound was the hissing of molten steel and the bubbling of the nearby lake. Where the Noma had stood, only a pair of charred, smoking legs remained, twitching slightly before falling over into the dust. The super regeneration quirk could not heal a body that had been completely atomized on a cellular level. Shigaraki stood paralyzed. The hand on his face slipped slightly, revealing a wide, terrified crimson eye. Noma! Shigaraki whispered, his voice cracking. My Noma, it absorbed 100% of All Might. What did they? He looked at the 2 boys. Izuku and Katsuki stood frozen in their stances. The white, blue, and purple auras dissipated into the air like steam. For a moment, they looked like gods. Untouchable. Ascendant. Then, the human limitation snapped back. Izuku's eyes rolled back into his head. The sheer, unfathomable strain of channeling a godly attack through an unprepared, mortal vessel struck him like a sledgehammer. His muscles seized, his veins burned, and he collapsed face first onto the concrete. Katsuki didn't fare much better. The explosive recoil of the Gallic gun tore through his nervous system. He coughed up a splatter of saliva, his knees buckling. He looked at Izuku's unconscious form, a faint, exhausted smirk touching his lips. Not bad. Kakarot. Katsuki fell sideways, hitting the ground completely unconscious. Todoroki, Kirishima, and All Might stared at the 2 fallen boys in absolute, brain-breaking awe. What, in the world, are they? Todoroki whispered, his usual cold demeanor completely shattered by the sheer scale of the attack. All Might looked at the smoking trench that had been carved through his impenetrable training facility. He looked at the vaporized remains of the monster designed to kill him. Midoriya. Bakugo. All Might thought, trembling. They didn't just use quirks. That was a synchronized attack. They moved with a perfect, instinctual harmony. Like they'd done it a million times before. Kurogiri. Shigaraki shrieked, tearing at his neck in absolute panic. Get us out of here. Those kids, they're cheating. They're glitching the game. Get us out. Kurogiri, having recovered from Katsuki's pin, quickly expanded his mist, wrapping around Shigaraki. Before All Might or the other heroes could intercept, the warp gate collapsed in on itself, leaving the USJ silent once more. Sirens wailed in the distance. The UA teachers, led by Principal Nizu and President Mike, burst through the destroyed entrance, expecting a massacre. Instead, they found the number one hero standing over the unconscious bodies of two teenage boys, surrounded by the melted, decimated ruins of the facility. All Might! Nizu called out, running down the steps. Are you all right? Where are the villains? All Might slowly turned to face the principal. He looked down at Izuku and Katsuki. They're gone, All Might said softly. He pointed to the massive, smoking hole in the dome's wall. And I think, the world as we know it is about to change. As the paramedics rushed in to load Izuku and Katsuki onto stretchers, a strange phenomenon occurred. The medical scanners beeped wildly as they attached electrodes to the boys' chests. Their heartbeats were erratic, but they were beating in perfect, mirrored synchronization. Deep within their unconscious minds, the golden dreams had shifted. Izuku was no longer watching the green planet explode alone. He was standing on a tournament ring, looking across the tile at a spiky-haired prince in blue armor. Katsuki was no longer standing on a mountain of corpses. He was standing in a wasteland, cracking his knuckles, glaring at the grinning idiot in the orange GI. The seal was broken. The echoes of the past had caught up to the present. The scions were awake. The sterile, blinding white of Recovery Girls' clinic was a stark contrast to the apocalyptic wasteland of Katsuki Bakugo's mind. He lay on a stiff hospital bed, staring at the acoustic tiles of the ceiling, his body wrapped in bandages. According to the medical charts at the foot of his bed, he had suffered severe muscular tearing, hairline fractures in his forearms, and severe exhaustion. He should have been in agonizing pain. He shouldn't have been able to move, yet beneath the layers of gauze, his muscles were humming. They weren't just healing, they were knitting back together denser, thicker, and harder than before. A strange, vibrating vitality surged through his veins. Every time he pushed his body past the brink of destruction, he didn't just recover, he evolved. It was a biological cheat code that defied every known law of quirk genetics. Zenkai, a voice in the dark recesses of his consciousness whispered. Katsuki closed his eyes, and the sterile clinic melted away. Suddenly, he wasn't Katsuki Bakugo, the explosive prodigy of Muzurifu. He was standing in a torrential downpour on a rocky plateau. He was older, his body clad in a blue bodysuit, his muscles bulging with impossible mass. A golden aura violently flickered around him, repelling the rain in a halo of steam. In this memory, his heart was heavy with a toxic, suffocating concoction of pride and bitter shame. He had allowed a wizard to infiltrate his mind. He had allowed the darkness in his heart to be weaponized, all for the sake of power. All for the sake of defeating him. Tell me, is it slavery when you get what you want? His own voice echoed in his memory, directed at the man in the orange GI. I wanted him to reawaken the evil in my heart. I wanted him to return me to the way I was before. Katsuki's eyes snapped open, his breath hitching as a phantom spike of agony pierced his chest. The memory of a self-destructive explosion that had turned him to stone and dust. He sat up violently, ripping the four from his arm. He didn't care about the beeping monitors. He looked down at his trembling hands. I remember, Katsuki whispered to the empty room. His voice didn't crack with teenage angst. It vibrated with the deep, haunting gravitas of a fallen prince. I remember everything. 2 rooms down, Izuku Midoriya was experiencing a much quieter awakening. He was sitting cross-legged on his bed, completely still. He wasn't sleeping, but he wasn't entirely awake either. To the untrained eye, he looked like a teenager meditating, but to anyone sensitive to energy, the air in Izuku's room felt incredibly heavy, as if the gravity had been multiplied by 10. Izuku's mind was soaring across galaxies. He remembered running endlessly along a winding, yellow road in the clouds. He remembered a small planet with a talking monkey. He remembered the blinding fury of watching his best friend explode into dust on a dying green planet. He remembered the weight of the universe on his shoulders, holding his hands up to the sky to borrow the energy of the grass, the trees, and the people. He opened his eyes. The vibrant emerald irises briefly flashed a brilliant, luminescent teal before settling back. He looked at his right hand. The scars from his fight with the zero-pointer were still there, but the underlying muscle felt different. The catastrophic damage he had anticipated from the USJ incident hadn't materialized. Instead, the white-blue energy he and Katsuki had unleashed had acted as a conduit, burning out the impurities in his physical vessel. Son Goku, Izuku murmured, testing the name on his tongue. It felt right. It felt like putting on a perfectly tailored glove. Yet, he was still Izuku Midoriya. He still loved his mother. He still idolized All Might. The memories of Goku didn't erase Izuku. They layered over him, merging the timid, heroic heart of a quirkless boy with the indomitable, battle-hungry spirit of the universe's greatest martial artist. We're both here, Izuku thought, looking toward the wall that separated his room from Katsuki's. Vegeta. You're awake too, aren't you? The media frenzy following the USJ attack was unprecedented. Class 1A had survived a coordinated assault by the League of Villains, but the details of the climax were highly classified. The official report stated that All Might had defeated the biological weapon known as Noma. But Class 1A knew the truth. When Aizawa, wrapped in bandages like a mummy, strolled into the classroom 2 days later to announce the upcoming UA Sports Festival, the atmosphere was stifling. The Sports Festival is one of Japan's biggest events, Aizawa droned, his voice muffled by the gauze. In the past, the Olympics were the world's festival of sports. Now the UA Sports Festival has taken that place. This is your chance to be scouted by top heroes. The class erupted in cheers, the tension of the villain attack temporarily swept away by the prospect of the future. But in the back row, Izuku and Katsuki sat in perfect, terrifying silence. They hadn't spoken since the USJ. They hadn't even looked at each other. Yet the air between their desks seemed to warp and distort with an invisible, suffocating pressure. Midoriya, Ochako Uraraka whispered, leaning over. Are you okay? You haven't written anything in your notebook all day. Izuku blinked, pulling himself from his thoughts. He looked down at his blank notebook. In the past, he would have been frantically scribbling strategies for the sports festival. Now, the idea of analyzing his classmates' quirks felt trivial. I'm fine, Uraraka-san, Izuku smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. There was a calm, impenetrable depth to his gaze that made Ochako subconsciously sit up straighter. Just focusing. At the front of the room, Aizawa dismissed the class for lunch. As the students began to stand, a crowd of students from other classes blocked the doorway. What's going on? Mineta squeaked. They're scouting the enemy, small fry, Katsuki Bakugo sneered, standing up and shoving his hands into his pockets. He walked toward the door, his posture radiating a predatory arrogance. We're the class that survived the villains. They want to see what they're up against. A purple-haired boy from the General Studies course, Hitoshi Shinso, stepped to the front of the crowd. I came to see what the famous Class A was like, but you seem pretty arrogant. Depending on the results of the festival, they'll consider transferring students into the hero course. And transferring people out. Consider this a declaration of war. The class tensed, but Katsuki didn't look at Shinso. He didn't even acknowledge the boy's existence. Katsuki's neck slowly snapped to the side, his crimson eyes locking onto Izuku Midoriya at the back of the classroom. A declaration of war? Katsuki echoed, his voice dropping an octave. He turned his back on the crowd of students, completely ignoring them, and began walking slowly down the aisle toward Izuku. The students of Class 1A instinctively parted, stepping out of Katsuki's way. The air grew heavy, smelling faintly of ozone and burning ozone. Katsuki stopped at Izuku's desk. He slammed his palms down on the wood. The desk groaned under the physical pressure. Listen to me, Katsuki snarled, his eyes wide and unblinking. I don't give a damn about these extras. I don't give a damn about this festival, or the pros watching, or the media. Izuku slowly looked up. He didn't flinch. He didn't stutter. He just stared back. You've been hiding it. For 10 years, you've been looking down on me. Katsuki's voice trembled with a rage so profound it bordered on insanity. The memories of their past life were bleeding through his teenage brain, warping his reality. He wasn't in a classroom. He was in the World Martial Arts Tournament. He was on Namek. He was in the hyperbolic time chamber. I am the prince, Katsuki hissed, sparks of violent purple bioelectricity arcing across his knuckles. I will not be second place. Not to a low-class reject. Not to you. I'm not looking down on you, Kaken, Izuku said, his voice terrifyingly calm. Shut up. Katsuki roared. Don't give me that innocent crap. I felt your energy at the USJ. You were holding back. Even when we killed that monster, you didn't use all of it. The classroom was dead silent. Kirishima tried to step forward. Hey, Bakugo, man, calm down. Stay out of this. Katsuki snapped, unleashing a wave of pure ki pressure that pushed Kirishima back a foot without physically touching him. Katsuki leaned closer to Izuku, their noses inches apart. In the festival, Katsuki breathed, his pupils contracted into tiny pinpricks of crimson. You will use everything. You will fight me at your absolute best. And I will crush you into the dirt. Do you hear me, Kakarot? The name hung in the air. Kakarot. Who is Kakarot? Kaminari whispered to Siro, utterly bewildered. Izuku didn't answer the question. A slow, subtle smirk, a smirk that did not belong to the timid Deku, crept onto his face. The battle hunger of a scion, stoked by the challenge of his eternal rival, flared within his chest. I hear you, Vegeta, Izuku replied softly. Katsuki's breath hitched. Hearing the name spoken aloud by Izuku sent a shockwave through his nervous system. Katsuki shoved off the desk, turned on his heel, and violently pushed his way through the crowd of students at the door, leaving a trail of stunned silence in his wake. 2 weeks of intense training followed. All Might had taken Izuku to a secluded training ground on the UA campus. The number one hero was eager to help Izuku refine one for all. Now young Midoriya, All Might instructed, in his muscle form. At the USJ, you tapped into an extraordinary power. But it devastated your stamina. We need to focus on controlling the output of one for all. Keep it at 5%. Izuku stood in the center of the field, wearing his gym uniform. He closed his eyes. Right. 5%, Izuku muttered. He didn't activate one for all the way All Might expected. Instead of visualizing an egg not exploding in a microwave, Izuku visualized the flow of ki. He focused on the red energy, the Kaioken. Ba-thump. A faint, transparent red aura flared around Izuku's body, accompanied by the crackle of one for all's green lightning. Like this? Izuku asked, his hair blowing upward slightly from his own thermal updraft. All Might stared, a bead of sweat rolling down his cheek. Yes, well. That is certainly 5% of something. But my boy, what exactly is that red energy? It isn't a quirk I possess. Izuku looked at his hands. It's hard to explain, All Might. It's life energy. Ki. It's a technique called Kaioken. It multiplies my base power. One for all, it feels like it's merging with my ki. It's amplifying my base, which makes the Kaioken even stronger. All Might rubbed his chin, utterly baffled. Kaioken? Where did you learn such a thing? From a king, in a dream, Izuku answered vaguely, a sheepish, Goku-like chuckle escaping his lips. But I have to be careful. If I multiply it too high, my body will tear itself apart. Even with one for all reinforcing my bones, the muscular strain is insane. Just be careful, my boy, All Might sighed, feeling completely out of his depth. The world is watching. Show them the symbol of peace is here. I will, Izuku nodded, his eyes hardening. And I'll show him, too. The day of the UA Sports Festival arrived. The stadium was a massive, colossal structure, packed with tens of thousands of screaming fans and pro heroes. The media helicopters buzzed overhead like metal flies. In the Class 1A waiting room, the tension was palpable. Shoto Todoroki, the boy with the dual temperature quirk, had just walked up to Izuku. Midoriya, Todoroki said, his voice devoid of emotion. Objectively speaking, I am stronger than you. But All Might has his eye on you. I will beat you. The class gasped at the second declaration of war. Izuku looked at Todoroki. In the past, he would have been intimidated, but now, as he looked at the dual-haired boy, Izuku just saw a talented fighter who was severely holding himself back by refusing to use his left side. Todoroki, Izuku said, his voice calm. You're incredibly strong. But if you don't fight with everything you have, you won't even be able to touch me. Todoroki narrowed his eyes, insulted by the dismissal. From the corner of the room, Katsuki scoffed loudly. Don't flatter yourself, half and half. You're just a warm-up. He belongs to me. The class filed out into the stadium, greeted by the deafening roar of the crowd. The R-rated hero, Midnight, stood on a podium, cracking her whip to silence the audience. Time for the player pledge, Midnight announced. Representing the first-year students, Katsuki Bakugo from Class 1A. Katsuki walked slowly up the steps to the microphone. The stadium quieted down, expecting an inspiring speech from the top student of the entrance exam. Katsuki leaned into the microphone. His eyes scanned the crowd, brushing past the pro-heroes, the media, and his own parents. His gaze locked onto Izuku, who was standing in the middle of Class 1A. I pledge. Katsuki's voice echoed through the massive speakers. That I will be the one standing at the top. And to the one person here who actually matters. Katsuki pointed a finger directly at Izuku. Don't you dare disappoint me. The stadium erupted in a mix of boos and cheers. Class 1A groaned. Why is he always like this? Kirishima wept anime tears. Izuku didn't react. He simply tightened the belt of his gym uniform. The first event is an obstacle race. Midnight announced, a holographic map appearing behind her. It's a 4-kilometer race around the stadium. As long as you stay on the course, anything goes. On your marks, get set. Go! The green lights flashed. A massive bottleneck of students jammed into the narrow starting tunnel. Todoroki immediately unleashed a massive wave of ice, freezing the ground and the feet of dozens of students, propelling himself forward into the lead. Nice try, Todoroki! Momo Yayorozu yelled, breaking free alongside a few others. But as Todoroki skated out of the tunnel, anticipating a comfortable lead, a terrifying, deafening roar shattered his eyes from behind. A pillar of violent orange and purple explosions erupted from the tunnel. Katsuki Bakugo shot into the air like a cruise missile, his face contorted in a feral grin. A split second later, a streak of crackling green lightning and a faint red aura blasted out of the tunnel, shattering the remaining ice into powder. Izuku Midoriya rocketed forward, his feet barely touching the ground, moving at a speed that made him look like a blur. Target acquired. Present mic screamed from the commentator's booth. The first obstacle. The Robo Inferno. Massive, towering zero-pointers blocked the path. Todoroki casually froze the first one, causing it to lose balance and fall, aiming to block the path for those behind him. But Izuku and Katsuki didn't slow down. Out of my way! Katsuki roared. He didn't fly over the robot. He flew directly through it. Channeling his ki into his palms, he unleashed a localized Gallic explosion that bored a massive, smoking hole straight through the steel torso of the zero-pointer. Izuku took the one on the left. He leaped into the air, activating One for All at 5% mixed with a burst of Kaioken. His fist connected with the robot's head. The concussive shockwave didn't just break the robot. It sent the massive machine flying backward, tumbling end over end until it crashed off the course entirely. Todoroki stared in shock as Izuku and Katsuki blew past him, completely ignoring his presence. What is that power? Todoroki muttered, suddenly realizing the terrifying gap between them. The race became a two-man spectacle. The rest of the students were simply background noise. Through the canyon of the fall, Katsuki and Izuku didn't use the ropes. Katsuki flew using his explosions, while Izuku used pure, explosive leg strength to bound from pillar to pillar in massive, gravity-defying leaps. They arrived at the final obstacle, the minefield. The final stretch. Present Mike yelled. A massive minefield. If you step on them, they explode. Todoroki caught up, carefully navigating the mines with his ice. But the moment Katsuki and Izuku arrived, they abandoned all caution. Katsuki landed directly in the center of the minefield. As a mine detonated under his foot, he didn't flinch. The explosion washed over him, completely ineffective against his Ki-reinforced skin. He used the concussive force of the mines to propel himself even faster, sprinting through the explosions like a demon born of fire. Izuku matched him. He activated full cowling, green lightning sparking around him. He didn't avoid the mines either. He ran straight through them, the red aura of the Kaioken acting as a shield. They were neck and neck, their elbows bumping, their eyes locked in a peripheral glare of absolute determination. "You're too slow, Kakarot!" Katsuki screamed, unleashing a massive blast behind him to boost his speed. "I'm just getting started, Vegeta!" Izuku yelled back, his heart giving a singular, powerful thump. The red aura flared violently. With a final, explosive burst of speed that cracked the earth beneath him, Izuku crossed the finish line a fraction of a second before Katsuki. "First place!" Midnight yelled. "Izuku Midoriya!" Katsuki skidded to a halt, digging his heels into the dirt. He glared at the scoreboard, his teeth grinding so hard his jaw ached. He had lost the first round. Izuku turned to him, panting slightly, and gave a thumbs up, a bright, innocent smile on his face. The smile infuriated Katsuki more than the loss. "He's playing with me. He's barely breaking a sweat." The second event was the cavalry battle. The first place winner, Izuku Midoriya, is worth 10 million points. Midnight announced. The stadium erupted. Izuku suddenly found himself the target of every single student in the arena. He needed a team. Achiko Uraraka approached him, bringing along Hatsune from the support course, who provided jetpacks and hover boots. Tokoyami Fumikage, with his incredible dark shadow, completed the defense. Across the field, Katsuki was forming his own team. Kirishima, Siro, and Ishido offered their quirks. "Listen up," Katsuki ordered, standing on Kirishima's shoulders. "I don't care about the other teams. I don't care about the small fry. We are going straight for the 10 million. We are hunting Kakarot." "Who is Kakarot?" Kirishima yelled, utterly confused. "Just follow my lead," the buzzer sounded. The cavalry battle began. Todoroki's team, consisting of Ada, Yayorozu, and Kaminari, immediately made a beeline for Izuku. "Midoriya," Todoroki said coldly. "I'll be taking that headband." Todoroki unleashed a massive wave of ice to freeze the other teams and trap Izuku. But before the ice could reach Izuku, a blistering inferno of blue-hot explosions shattered the glacier into steam. Katsuki Bakugo's team crashed into the center of the arena, intercepting Todoroki. "Out of my way, half and half!" Katsuki roared, his eyes entirely focused on Izuku. "He's mine!" Todoroki narrowed his eyes. "Bakugo. Don't interfere." "Interfere?" Katsuki laughed, a manic, battle-crazed sound that sent shivers down Todoroki's spine. "You're the one in my way!" Katsuki didn't wait for his team. He leaped off Kirishima's shoulders, propelling himself through the air with a massive explosion, directly toward Izuku. He left his horse. Present Mike screamed. "That's a penalty if he touches the ground." Izuku looked up as Katsuki descended upon him like a meteor. "Tokoyami, defend!" Izuku ordered. Dark shadow surged upward to block Katsuki, but Katsuki simply swatted the shadow away with a backhand cloaked in dense, purple ki, causing the beast to shriek in pain and retreat. Katsuki reached for the 10 million point headband on Izuku's forehead. Izuku didn't flinch. He brought his arm up, channeling One for All and the Kaioken. Their forearms clashed in midair. The resulting shockwave didn't just rattle the stadium, it completely dispersed the clouds above UA high. The sheer kinetic feedback blew Todoroki's team backward, sliding across the dirt. For a split second, suspended in the air, Izuku and Katsuki locked eyes. "Stop holding back!" Katsuki snarled, their arms trembling against each other. "I know this isn't your full power. Where is the gold, Kakarot? Where is it?" Izuku's expression shifted. The polite, heroic student vanished. The Scion warrior looked back at Katsuki with cold, calculating intensity. "You haven't earned it yet, Vegeta," Izuku whispered. Katsuki's eyes widened in sheer outrage. Before he could retaliate, gravity took hold. Siro shot out his tape, wrapping it around Katsuki's waist and yanking him back onto their horse just before his boots touched the ground. Time's up. Midnight's whip cracked. Izuku had kept the 10 million points. Katsuki's team, having passively stolen enough points during their rampage across the field, secured second place. Todoroki barely managed third. Katsuki punched the ground, a small crater forming beneath his fist. He didn't care that he advanced. He had been brushed off. He had been told he wasn't worthy of the golden power. His pride, the pride of the Scion Prince, was a roaring inferno. The final event was a one-on-one tournament. During the lunch break, the brackets were randomly drawn, though secretly. Aizawa and Nisa had ensured certain matchups for the sake of assessing the most volatile students. Izuku advanced through the first round easily. He fought Hitoshi Shinso. When Shinso asked Izuku a question, Izuku politely answered, triggering the brainwashing quirk. Izuku's mind went blank. He found himself in a dark void. Shinso commanded him to walk out of bounds, but suddenly, the void illuminated. A massive, spectral image of a golden great ape appeared behind Izuku's consciousness, roaring with a force that literally shattered the mental control like glass. Izuku snapped out of it, sending a small shockwave of ki outward that blew Shinso out of the ring. Shinso's brainwashing was powerful, but it couldn't control a body that housed the spirit of a god. Katsuki fought Ochiko Uraraka in his first round. The crowd booed him for being ruthless, for not holding back against a fragile girl, but Katsuki ignored them. He saw Ochiko's determination. He recognized her warrior spirit. He didn't use his ki. He strictly used his explosions, matching her meteor shower strategy and blasting her away with a massive explosion, ending the match quickly out of respect for her effort. In the quarterfinals, Izuku fought Todoroki. The match was an emotional spectacle. Izuku pushed Todoroki to his limits, forcing the boy to acknowledge his fire side. "It's your power, isn't it?" Izuku shouted. Todoroki unleashed a massive wave of fire and ice. Izuku countered with a 100% smash, sacrificing his fingers to meet the attack. The clash blew out the stadium's defenses, and Todoroki was knocked out of bounds by the sheer wind pressure. Izuku had won, but his right hand was bruised and broken. He went to Recovery Girl. "You promised not to do this," she sighed, preparing to heal him. "I won't do it again," Izuku promised, watching his flesh knit together, the Zenkai boost rushing through him, washing away his fatigue. He flexed his newly healed hand. The bones were denser, the muscles tighter. He was ready. The brackets updated on the massive screen. Semifinals, Izuku Midoriya vs. Katsuki Bakugo. The stadium buzzed with anticipation. The two prodigies of Class 1A. The two boys who had annihilated the zero-pointers and tied the obstacle course. Izuku walked down the dark, concrete tunnel leading to the arena. The roar of the crowd was a muffled hum above him. He stopped. Standing in the shadows of the tunnel, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, was Katsuki. The air in the tunnel was suffocatingly dense. The temperature was at least 10 degrees hotter than outside. "Your arm is healed," Katsuki observed, his voice echoing in the concrete corridor. "Recovery Girl," Izuku replied simply, though they both knew it was the Zenkai biology doing the heavy lifting. Katsuki slowly pushed off the wall. He walked toward Izuku, stopping only a few feet away. In the dim light, Katsuki's crimson eyes seemed to glow. "Do you know what it was like, Kakarot?" Katsuki asked softly. The aggression was gone, replaced by a raw, bleeding vulnerability that Katsuki Bakugo would never show anyone else. "Waking up in this body? Believing I was the strongest, only to realize I was trapped in a fragile shell?" Izuku remained silent, listening. "The dreams," Katsuki continued, his hands clenching into fists. "I saw the rain. I saw the tournament stands. I saw that pink bastard. And I saw my own death. I sacrificed everything, my pride, my life, my family, and it still wasn't enough. And then I wake up here, surrounded by these weak, pathetic heroes who play dress-up and care about rankings." Katsuki looked up, his eyes burning with absolute conviction. "I remember Majin Vegeta," Katsuki snarled, the purple ki beginning to leak from his pores, crackling around his boots. "I remember the humiliation of knowing you were always one step ahead of me. Even when you were dead, you were stronger." Izuku took a deep breath. He let his own aura leak, a soft, translucent white energy that pushed back against Katsuki's purple oppressive weight. We aren't there anymore, Vegeta, Izuku said softly. That was a different life. A different universe. It doesn't matter, Katsuki shouted, his voice echoing violently. The soul is the same. The pride is the same. I don't give a damn about being a pro-hero, Deku. I don't give a damn about All Might. The only reason I exist in this pathetic world is to finally prove, once and for all, that the Prince of all Scions stands above you. Katsuki raised his hand, pointing a finger directly at Izuku's chest. No tricks. No holding back, Katsuki demanded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. If you try to fight me with that pathetic quirk alone, if you don't use the gold, I will kill you in that ring. I swear it. Izuku looked down at Katsuki's finger. Then, he looked up into the blazing crimson eyes of his oldest rival. The timid, stuttering boy from Mizudafu completely melted away. Izuku smiled. It wasn't a hero's smile. It wasn't a reassuring grin meant to save civilians. It was the smile of a man who loved combat more than breathing. It was the smile of a warrior who had fought gods, demons, and tyrants, and found his greatest joy in the clash of fists. Izuku reached up and gently, but firmly, pushed Katsuki's hand away. You want the gold, Vegeta? Izuku asked, his voice adopting a confident, booming resonance that made the concrete walls of the tunnel vibrate. Izuku's emerald eyes flashed a brilliant, blinding teal. A sudden, terrifying spike of ki pulsed from his body, cracking the floor beneath them. Then come and take it. Izuku walked past Katsuki, heading toward the light at the end of the tunnel. Katsuki stood in the dark, trembling. A massive, unhinged grin split across his face. His blood was boiling. The thrill of the impending battle washed away all his anger, leaving only the pure, unadulterated ecstasy of the fight. Finally, Katsuki whispered. Above them, President Mick's voice boomed through the stadium's speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the match you've all been waiting for. The semi-finals. Two of Class A's strongest, fastest, and most destructive students are about to clash. Izuku stepped into the sunlight of the arena, the roar of the crowd washing over him. A moment later, Katsuki stepped out from the opposite tunnel, cracking his knuckles, his eyes locked dead onto Izuku. In the left corner, the boy who shattered the ice and took first in the race, Izuku Midoriya. And in the right corner, the explosive prodigy who crushed the opposition, Katsuki Bakugo. Up in the stands, Class 1A leaned forward. Aizawa, sitting in the commentator booth next to President Mike, gripped the edge of his desk. He could feel the air pressure in the stadium shifting. Down in the ring, Samantha stood on the sidelines, preparing to intervene if things got out of hand. Are both fighters ready? Midnight yelled, cracking her whip. Izuku dropped into his classic turtle school martial arts stance. He bent his knees, placing his left hand forward, his right hand pulled back near his hip. Katsuki dropped into his royal stance, standing slightly more upright, his hands raised, fingers slightly curled, ready to catch and strike. They didn't look like high school students. They looked like ancient warlords preparing to decide the fate of a planet. Begin! Midnight screamed. The earth beneath them shattered, and the sports festival truly began.